how do you think Dominik Mysterio did in roughly 15-minute main event match against Edge in all the categories that count? Wrestling skill, timing, realism, body language, emoting. This was a big moment for somebody who, not to conflate two segments, but, Kevin Owens in theory talked about somebody getting a leg up because of how they look. Well, Dominik, if in like a real life sense, is getting a bit of a leapfrog over a lot of people who went through developmental because of his dad. And so it's a storyline, but it's also a reality. Did he look like he earned that spot tonight?
And it's, to be fair, it's been a relatively long journey for Dom to get to this significant main event spot. And I think my overarching concern, maybe, I don't know if concern is really the word, but my what I'm coming away with is the question, have we just seen the highest height that Dominik will rise to as an active wrestler? And I think that's going to remain on my mind, regarding this whole subject, because the story is there for him. But I will say that as someone who has historically not been really on board the Dominik train, I wouldn't say a detractor, but he doesn't excite me all that much, and the things he's involved with have not engaged me very much. The storytelling in this match was very interesting, and I would say the brunt of it was on Edge's shoulders, but they were dealing with a complex setup here where Dominik was the sympathetic figure, but he's also the twerpy heel, and Edge is the more vicious guy trying to teach a lesson, but he's still very, very much in the babyface role with, one of the people who Dom turned on in Ray still like begging Edge not to do what Edge doesn't want to do, but what he feels he needs to do. And of course, that's what commentary was telling us what was going on, but I felt Edge was doing a good job of making that seem like that was where he was coming from as well. But for Dom's part, and I'm someone who feels that the storytelling element in wrestling is far more important than the physical work. Dom really lived up to the side of it that he needed to. I was engaged and just really trying to figure out where they were going just tonight, where they're going in the long term of this storyline, and the fact that someone in our position, someone in my position as a guest analyst on PWTorch and whatnot, is sitting there not having a finite idea of where this is going, but still being interested. I think that says a lot. And Dom was there as obviously as a large part of the match, and his entrance, sure, they gave him the new music and the lights and the new outfit and everything, so there's the aesthetics of it, but his demeanor still, I think, lived up to the moment and had me intrigued, to see what he was going to do. And then for the working part of it, I was bought in for the storyline, so nothing he did physically took me out of that. So that was a crucial element here, I think.
Yeah, I mean, if Dominik wanted to have the third worst match on Raw, he succeeded, and I don't mean that in a negative sense for him, as much as people who believe that he's getting pushed above his skill level and experience. And like you said, it's been a long journey, but this is still he didn't go through developmental. He didn't have main event matches where you're like, oh, on NXT, where people are like, oh, this guy can be something on the main roster. This was still a big test for him in a brand new role. And yes, he's against Edge, who's, a pro and going to be able to have a good match with just about anyone. But, I mean, I would say that there were a couple matches worse than this, happened to be the women's matches on this show. And even on its own merits, even if there weren't a couple rough matches earlier, I thought he looked good. I think he's playing the part he needs to play. And I don't resent him getting a leg up because of who his dad is, in part because it's integral in his story. They're baking into his, it's baked in but not highlighted. That does he belong here? They don't dwell on that. Like, is he getting an advantage because of who his dad is? But it is sort of baked in. People sort of feel that way about him. But he's been a largely likable, sympathetic character who seemed a little over his head, but getting coached by his dad. So everything in real life that you might use to second guess Dominik on Raw is acknowledged, at least in how he's pushed. And I'll contrast it with, 30 years ago, Bill Watts pushing Eric Watts. And, there were just these embarrassing videos gushing about what a great athlete and how charismatic and how sexy Eric Watts was. It was just uncomfortable to watch sometimes. And that's not what they're not treating Dominik like he's a top star. And so the idea now is, hey, he broke away from his dad to try to grow and prove himself. And you also have Rhea Ripley playing her part really well on the sidelines, and that chemistry and that dynamic. And the announcer's saying, that he always had this resentment in him, and now it's being brought to the forefront by the Judgment Day. So I just think there's enough storyline support to blunt some of the criticism, because everything about his story sort of matches the reality. And I would say tonight, and I would even say last week, but as a character with his facial expressions and his body language, that produced video package, and then what he did in the ring tonight, I think he gets a passing grade. I don't think anyone's going, this is the next great wrestler of this generation. You can't rule anything out, but I mean, he's nowhere near anyone being able to declare that. But I think he's, first, the storytelling, as you put it, that WWE is putting him in the position, an important position, an important role in a story. I think he's carrying it out. Body language, facial expressions, promos, and in terms of his work in the ring. And, it's a compliment to Edge, too. But I think Dominik has looked sufficient otherwise also. So I wasn't surprised. He looked, real solid here in the main event.
Yeah, I agree with all of that. And, while none of us like when nepotism affects us in the real world, you know what I mean. When it comes to wrestling, we see a lot of it, and especially covering NXT, like everybody, it seems like half of the roster at any given time is somebody's offspring. But the storyline is so interesting here that you step back and you realize, like, well, I'm on board for the ride, and you know what, they couldn't be telling this story with anyone other than Ray's real son. So if they had done this with Kurt Angle and Jason Jordan, like I don't think it wouldn't have the same effect.
Right.
And just for that part of it, which is slightly tangential, but Ray coming at it, it could be such a simpler story where Ray agrees with Edge and they want to teach a lesson to Dom and the Judgment Day, and then it's just heels versus baby faces like usual. But Ray still playing the father and still wanting to defend his son even when his son has turned on him. I think I'll use the term lightly, but I do think it lends more of an air of reality to it. Actually, a better word is believability. I believe it more. And it's just so much more of an interesting situation. So much of this match was we're on Edge's side here, but there are the wrinkles of Dom being sympathetic, and so we're starting to wonder with the vicious look in Edge's face. And Edge, I loved the touch that Edge kept on pausing to look at the crowd, like, hey, you guys still with me? Was the impression I got from that. Like, you're not turning on, I'm not going too far, right? But then the question that is in all of our minds throughout this match is, how far is too far, though? I was also wondering when the cheap shot was going to come in and Dom was really going to take over. That never really came.
I would say Rhea Ripley grabbing his leg on a superplex attempt was the interference that explained Dominik getting a leg up, no pun intended, on Edge.
Right. And you were right about your comment on Rhea. Her facial expressions on the outside helped tell the story very well. But yeah, we're wondering how far is too far. And of course, when Dom gets tied up in the ropes, like Andre.
You mean on TV, like, okay, not with Rhea behind the scenes?
Exactly.
Sorry, but they're implying so much, and I know it's gone crazy on social media,
yeah.
and I couldn't let that go. I had to strike in the moment. I mean, the idea that she's turning him into a man, it's like it's 10-year-old friendly because it's all, it's suggestive, but in a way where no one, young would connect the dots. But for adults, they're like, I know what's going on. I know what's going on with Ripley and Dom. So anyway, you can finish your point if you can.
Oh yeah, you're just thinking as the viewer, like, oh well, this is when Ray's got to come in, right? And of course he did, and thankfully, for the sake of awkwardness, that it wasn't the other situation that you're talking about that Ray walked in on.
Yes.